And that was Don't Stop Believin' by Journey. And we are back with Talking Sport.
Yeah, we love it. It's great to be back. And talking of believing, there's a bit of hype down in Tasmania because they are starting to believe. And there's been a bit of a push and a bid that's been going for a couple of years now. And they're getting some legs with it. And there's really one requirement from what I'm hearing that's the last tick, and that is that they're expecting a lot of money to be put in from the federal government to make sure that they have a stadium to the level that the AFL require. And there's a position down at Macquarie Point in Hobart. If you've been down to Hobart, it's a beautiful position. And a great stadium down there is certainly required. And it's not just for footy. I mean, you look at Optus Stadium over here in Perth and they have bands and they can utilise the facilities for other great events, and obviously it's money driven. A stadium down there would be a game changer and it'd be great for the state. But there's one man that we would love to chat to because he's been involved with just about all forms of football. He's been involved as a school teacher, so he understands whether it was a coach years ago or where he follows the school footy. He's a commentator in the TSL, and he's also a very passionate supporter of footy. I remember when I knew him, he was a school teacher at St Patrick's College. He still is, and I think he was my Year 9 coach at one stage, actually. And, he was a Fitzroy supporter. So he went through some pain, poor old Dave. I remember at footy trainings, he was the only bloke that had a Fitzroy long-sleeve jumper on. And he would probably be a Brisbane supporter, I would have thought, when they changed. So we're going to talk to Dave Mohr down there in Tassie. And we'll ask him a few questions about the likelihood of the Tasmanian 19th licence, whether there's a big chance to get up with the Tassie team, and there's obviously a lot of requirements for the development of school footy. Also the development of the local under-18 competitions. There's a VFL team, the Tasmanian Devils, that are playing in the under-18 competition. So they've been quite strong. An ex-coach, Jeremy Webberley from Clarence, he's been at the helm of them, and they've certainly increased as a team. So Tassie football is certainly strong. There's been a couple of young players. Cowan, who's just gone to Carlton, he got picked up in the draft, a very strong half-back flanker. And then also there's been in the last couple of years some Tassie players. Sam Banks a couple of years ago, he got picked up and he's gone to the Tigers and he's been playing really well in the VFL. So there's certainly some talent, but they need more talent. We certainly haven't had a lot of the top 10 draft picks from the AFL from Tasmania, but they need to inject a lot of money, and I believe Gillon McLaughlin's been down there last week, and part of the conversation was the money that the AFL would inject into the bid to get the team up, and also how they would spend that money, and part of it would be grassroots footy. So I'd love to chat to Dave Mohr, who's, as I say, he's a TSL current commentator in the State League. So welcome, David.
Thanks, boys. Great to be on your first show.
Well, it's been certainly a couple of years since I've seen you, Dave. We played together at St Patrick's Old Boys, and you're a very passionate footy player and coach and supporter. And how are the Saints going down there in Launceston? Are they still a pretty strong amateur club?
Oh, yeah, they sure are. They won the premiership last year, so they're on a really good run of form, and they're one of the favourites for this year as well. And I remember playing with you back in the day, mate. You were a handy player. Trusty left footer.
Trusty left, yeah. That's I wasn't too good on the right, though, so I certainly didn't go too far. I played for the under-19s in Launceston back when they were the Raiders. Can you remember when there was the change? They used to be the Launceston Blues, but they joined the State League, and so there was already the Devonport Blues, so they couldn't have two teams at the Blues, so we had to change to the Raiders. I wasn't really that good at remembering the song of the Raiders, though, because it was a new song. But I played the under-19s there and had a bit of fun. But then it was just a bit of amateur footy down at St Pat's with some mates that I had at school, and that was a bit of fun. And then that was about the end of me. I dislocated a shoulder and hung up the boots.
Fantastic. And look, I'm really glad you've got your show up and running. It sounds like a fantastic initiative there, and bringing lots of local sport to the listeners.
Yeah, no, we're really excited about it, and part of being an online radio station, Dave, is we're a national radio station, so we can cover national sport, but we can also touch with the local sports, and part of that is obviously the AFL starting next week, and there's a big conversation that happened last week down there in Tassie. Big Gill, he came down and he was talking AFL 19th licence. Is Tasmania a chance?
Well, we're a chance, and it all really comes down now to our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. Where we're at the moment is that the licence is pretty much agreed to, pending the building of a stadium down at Mac Point on the coast line there of Hobart. And if that comes through, there's already money that's been pledged by the state government, by a little bit by the AFL as well. And there's some $240 million that needs to be pledged by the federal government. And at the moment, that's the decision that has to be made. Anthony Albanese sounds supportive in interviews, but he's sort of hedging his bets a little bit and saying it'll come out in the May budget. So we've got probably a month or two yet for this saga to play out. And really, we talk about a conversation. It's been going on for some 30 years here in Tasmania. And, it's close enough to touch, but we're not quite there yet.
It's very interesting because I was living down in Hobart up until about 4 or 5 years ago before I came back to Perth, and I was on the board of the Clarence Footy Club, and I really enjoyed being part of that club. So hello to any of the Clarence fellas and ladies that I got to meet down there. It was a great club and I had a great time there. And State League, there's some talent, but I found it very hard for the State League to be supported. Obviously, Hawthorn and North Melbourne play down there. But it's different having a Tassie team to having the Hawks or the Kangaroos, I would have thought. And It's just a matter of seeing if they can inject all that money into development. There's an avenue for the young kids to strive to go and play for their state. You and I remember what it was like for the Tassie State of Origin teams playing for the map of Tassie, and it was a passionate drive, and it'd be great to see that type of passion again. But Dave, you've been involved with sport and football at St Patrick's College in the school levels, and you see what it's like in the juniors. What sort of development do they need down there for the Tasmanian development and leagues to survive if there was an AFL licence granted? Because my concern is, like it was over here when the waffle really dropped off, they used to have crowds around 20,000, 25,000 at Subi, and then once the Eagles came in, it really dropped off. So how do you think that would cover?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, Faz, because obviously footy needs a boost, and it's not like it was back in the 80s and 90s where it was really footy in the winter, cricket in the summer, and other sports were very much minor sports. Footy's got to be out there competing for the hearts and minds of young people. And, we've got basketball now with the Jack Jumpers, and I might revisit that with you in a moment.
Yeah, they're going really well, aren't they?
That's right. And, you've got the Hurricanes with the cricket. You've got, an A-League team mooted down the track.
Right.
So there's a lot of other sports that it's really competing with. So you've got to really get the hooks into the young people. And whilst our junior development's still really good, like the Devils last year were fantastic, the Tasmania Devils in the NAB League, they nearly made the grand final.
Yeah, good friend of mine, Jeremy Webble, he's the coach there. I knew him at Clarence. You could see that he was the type of guy that was going to go places with coaching, and he's done really well, hasn't he?
That's right. And the juniors are still okay, but it's the players making that transition perhaps from the under 15s and 16s to playing older age footy. And that's where we're losing clubs, and clubs are struggling for numbers, just that making that transition. But to go back to your question, aspiration's a big thing. And just this week we had Scott Roth, the coach of Jack Jumpers, into the school I was at, and the kids wanted selfies with him. They wanted to ask him questions. And, that professional presence, the presence of a professional team in the community is really vital. Look, it may affect local footy a bit, but obviously the games won't all be played on Saturday afternoon, but it may give footy that boost that it really needs to get above some of these other sports that are perhaps out-competing it a bit at the moment.
Interesting if a new franchise comes in, you look at Gold Coast, you look at GWS and the way that they were structured. people would probably say that the Gold Coast setup probably wasn't the right way due to the fact that they had a lot of kids, but a lot of those kids didn't stay in Gold Coast. They wanted to come home. It'll be interesting to see how the draft pick scenario works if Tasmania come in. Is there a requirement that there's certain players from Tasmania that are playing in Victoria or WA need to go back and form, some 3 or 4 senior players to build a team around? That for me is really interesting, and also coaching structures and where they're going to come from, because I don't know whether they're going to have those type of structures and resources in Tassie right now.
I think that's one thing that Gill has said is that he's not going to rush into this. And we're probably talking about 2027, even 2028 now that there's this delay with the stadium decision. I think he wants to avoid the GWS Gold Coast situation where the team was announced and 18 months, 2 years later, it was playing. So I think he wants to make sure that the team is set up so that it can be successful early in its existence, rather than having to wait 4 or 5 years and struggle through. So I think that's a good approach. And I think, a lot of the things you're raising, a lot of the difficulties, a lot of the problems can be addressed if you give yourself a decent time frame to that first game. Yeah. And I think that's sensible.
Yeah. Well, talking of new franchises and new teams starting up and injecting some energy and passion in Tasmania, the Jack Jumpers have certainly done that in the basketball in the NBL down there in Hobart at the MyState Stadium or MyState Arena. It's been a great atmosphere, and people are saying that it could be the best atmosphere out of the NBL for teams to go down there. It's a real force when Tassie are playing down there.
I can attest to that, Faz, because I've been to quite a number of games at MyState Bank Arena. And, of course, they play a couple of games each year at the Silverdome, which I think is important as well in Launceston, and they've been fantastic as well. Look, it really is the best thing that's happened to Tassie sport in a long while. The hunger there was for that national presence, that team that we can get behind. And, look, you find people that didn't even follow basketball and didn't even follow sport have got on board. Yeah. And, in my workplace, the conversations on the Monday morning, it's all Jack Jumpers, the games on the weekend, and how they went. So it's really captured the imagination of the population, and more importantly, as I referred to before, the kids. They're all wearing the green singlets.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
All going to games. The families are involved. So, it's really been fantastic. It's a shot in the arm for just the confidence of Tassie that we can match it at that national level, and to make the grand final series in the first year and just be one game away from making it again in the second year. That's just, I think, unparalleled in Australian sport for a start-up team to be able to do that.
Yeah. And, the passion is definitely something you wouldn't question. People that talk about it at the water station and, over here in Perth or in Melbourne or whatever, the biggest concern they always talk about is there enough corporate dollar? Is there enough sponsorship? Will they get the crowds? Will they get the membership? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the crowd's membership will be fine. And look, there will come a time, obviously, when the team drops down the ladder a bit, and that's inevitable. But at the end of the day, you're going and watching top-level basketball. So if your team's winning, that's great. But if they're not, you're still seeing, the champions like Mitch Creek and Xavier Cooks and these sorts of players. It's interesting you mentioned about the financial part of it, because Larry Kesselman was on the news here tonight saying that they've started the phase of selling the team to a private ownership.
Wow.
And he said there's good interest already. And I suppose given the crowd numbers, given the interest of the population, the team, it's probably an attractive proposition at the moment for a private buyer. It was always the deal when the team was created that the first 2 years would be backed by Larry in the NBL.
Right.
Now we're on our own 2 feet coming up next season. So, that'll be an interesting transition. But certainly Larry was very positive about the interest that's out there. So,
well, that's pretty similar to what happened with the Wildcats over here. Craig Hutchinson got involved, and he's the owner now, which is huge. But the Wildcats have had probably 10 years of success, and they've probably had their run. They've dropped off a little bit, but they've got a guy that's pretty good in Cotton. He's a fantastic player. I love watching him. But, look, Tasmania have had a couple of great seasons, and look, I'd love to see them win the championship down there. Could you imagine the roof coming off just about with the premiership? And
Faz, you mentioned the Wildcats, and I think there's a real Wildcats influence with the Jack Jumpers with Jacob Chance, who's the assistant coach who was involved over there, and of course the head coach Scott Roth as well. So they've taken a lot of that culture, us against the rest of the competition sort of mindset, and they've brought that to the Jack Jumpers. And I think the spirit and the culture is something that will be set now for quite a number of years. And thanks to the Wildcats and the example they set.
Yes, well, Dave, it's been a great chat, and thanks very much for your time. In a nutshell, what's your thoughts? If you were edge your bets, would you think we're looking at around about an 80% chance at this stage, or do you think they're knocking it around about 95% chance?
Look, it's difficult. It's got very political, which is a pity. And
is that the north and south?
There's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's the anxiety that if the stadium is built in the south, that the fine facility that Utah Stadium is might not be utilised as it is now. There's all those sort of concerns, but it's become political. Parties are taking sides, and politicians are breaking ranks, and that sort of thing. But in the end of the day, will Anthony Albanese want to be the Prime Minister that finishes the dream of Tassie in the AFL? Because, to be honest, this could be the last time there's a serious bid for it to happen. So part of me says that he'll want to be part of that history in a positive way. There might be some conditions around funding the stadium. I think he's looking at making that a bigger precinct, and maybe looking at transport options and convention centre, restaurants and that sort of stuff. So he might be looking at something that's not just football.
Yeah.
So there might be some conditions on his contribution there in the funding. But, yeah, look, you asked me my opinion. I still think it will happen.
Wow.
And I think down the track you'll see the Tasmania Devils 2027, more likely 2028 in the AFL.
Well, you're talking to two other Tassie interested supporters that would probably look at them as a bit of a touching, touching the heartstrings with both SD and I from Launceston, and I'd certainly, for the first time, probably say that I would possibly have a second team. I certainly haven't jumped over to the Eagles and Dockers as a second team, even though we follow them. But I would have to say that I'd deeply be looking at following the Tassie team with great interest. And SD, you'd be keen to see Tassie get up, wouldn't you?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I wouldn't be letting the Tigers go, but definitely support a team.
Certainly different with the York Park days when I was around about 10, 11, 12, and you'd pop down and you'd see North Launceston versus Launceston, and there'd be about 700, 800 people there, but you had to fight pretty hard to get to the kiosk at half time to get your pie and sauce, and but it was great atmosphere, and there was rivalries when the finals came up. There'd be 5,000-6,000 people there, and it was great atmosphere. Just imagine what it would be like with an AFL licence and a Tassie team. It'd be absolutely awesome. Dave, thanks very much for joining us, and you're getting excited about the AFL starting next week?
Certainly. Those Tigers, you think they can get the job done?
I'm pretty confident they'll get in the top four with the injection of the midfield with Hopper and Taranto. I think Tigers have needed that. Cochin's obviously coming towards the end of his career, and the clearances-wise, Tigers have never been that strong, but I think that'll be a bit of a different game plan. I assume that you're a Brisbane supporter, being an ex-Fitzroy boy?
Yes, no, I still follow the line, so hopefully they can do well this year as well. But the interesting thing is a lot of people are naming who they think can win the premiership, and some people are naming up to 9 to 10 clubs who, with a good run with injuries and form and a bit of luck here and there, could take it out. So I think that's great for the league that there are so many teams that can be optimistic about 2023.
Yeah. Were you surprised to see Dunkley trade at the last minute to go into the midfield for Brisbane this year?
Yeah, he was always going to leave the Bulldogs. So, yeah, I thought there'd be a deal done there at the end of the day. So, didn't surprise me, yeah.
Well, it's getting exciting.
A couple of Tassie boys at the Tigers too, Faz. There's young Ryan Mansell and Sam Banks.
Yes.
So there's quite a few young boys there that have come from Tassie. And following the example of Nan Curvis, of course, who's done so well on the ruck.
Yeah, from Georgetown where SD is. So being a Tiger and being from Georgetown, I'd say that Nankervis is one of her favourite players. Dave, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it. We might touch base with you during our show during the year if that's a possibility for you. And good luck with your commentary down there. I'll be listening into your commentary on the TSL down there in Tassie during the year, and we'll wait and see what happens with that federal budget.
Thanks, guys, and good luck with the show going forward.
Cheers.